Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Dr. Chelsey Hauge of Positive Parenthood, and we are talking today about how to use presence and praise in order to really guide your children towards cooperation. And no, when I say your children, I'm talking about any kids that come into relationship with you. So we might be talking about your own kids. You might be talking about like a classroom of kids. We could be talking about a group of kids that you particularly work with. We could be just talking about kids you meet or your nieces and nephews or other kids in your family. So when I say that, just know that I want you to think about, for you in particular, the group of kids that you're most in contact with most of the time. Okay, so let's talk about presence. So presence is really the thing that we all want. To really get present with a child is to say to that child, you are worthy of my time and my attention more so than anything else, more than my email, more than my text, more than work, more than whatever else, taking the laundry out, more than doing the dishes, more than, I don't know, whatever's going on over there. Okay, isn't that what we all want? And I often say that presence is the highest form of praise. It's to say, hey, you are it. You're the most important thing. Now, oftentimes when I say this, people will say to me, but Chelsey, I don't have any time. How am I supposed to get present? I can't do that all the time. Or I work with a group of kids and I can't get present like that with all of them all the time. And I want to say what matters most is actually the quality of your presence, not the quantity. It's the quality. And a small dose of high quality presence is going to have a bigger behavioral impact than like halfway there for an hour. Okay, so thinking about, and we're going to talk in a minute about one way to get really present for just 5 minutes. So presence, know that it's really important to get present with your child, to really be in their world, to really listen and be there, okay, as often as possible. And that is the highest form of praise. So oftentimes when I talk about praise, people have heard about Carol Dweck's research on mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset. And they get a little worried about giving praise. People worry about giving inflated praise. They worry about giving praise that is going to nurture along a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is where a child like falls down or does something wrong and feels like they can't try again, right? The not being able to do something becomes a fixed quality, a way of being like, I can't do that. I'm not a good drawer. I can't do homework. I'm not good at building stuff, okay? Because maybe I built something once and it fell down. Or I built something 5 times and it fell down all 5 times. And what we're shooting for is actually a growth mindset where it's like, I built this Lego tower and it fell down and I'm trying a different way. Or I'm in a mindset of inquiry around how to do this differently, or what kind of help to get, or who I can ask, or what I could try, maybe different materials. So what we want is the growth mindset. And when we think about Dweck's research on praise, I think it's often misunderstood. That research was done with groups of children looking at the kind of words, the kind of language that was given to children. And when praised for a fixed quality, like, wow, you're the smartest. You just learned how to read. That's so cool. That is the thing that becomes troubling as compared to a group of children who were praised for the effort. So, wow, I see you were working really hard on that reading. That's so cool, right? So it's a simple shift that has a big impact. And the kids who are praised for effort over time do significantly better than the kids who receive praise that is focused on a quality. Okay, so we want to move away from sort of good girl, you're the best, you're the fastest, good boy, those kinds of qualifiers, because they're fixed. What we want to focus instead on is the qualifiers that enable or inspire growth or working hard or trying. Okay, So when we think, well, that's the kind of praise we want to give. Now, most of us, when we think about praising our kids, we often say things like, good job, good job, good job, good job. And the problem with good job is that jobs are an abstract concept, okay? And I know that you probably have a job. Maybe your job is even with 4-H. Maybe that's your volunteer job. But most children don't have jobs. And that kind of praise doesn't mean as much, right? It's not quite in the same grouping as good girl, good job, you're the or good girl, you're the fastest, or you're the best, or the most beautiful artist, or that kind of praise. But it doesn't, we don't sort of get as much like purchase for what we're giving, right? And I want to just maximize the impact so that it really takes me to present and gets me the kind of praise that's going to help a child cooperate. So I'm going to get rid of good job. I'm going to get rid of qualifiers like you're the best, you're the fastest. What also can happen with that is that, like, you know, you're the fastest skateboarder there ever was. And maybe you did really feel like that when you saw your child skateboard. You say that, and then it's like a week later, the child goes out and they meet another kid who's a faster skateboarder. And then they start to feel bad, like, oh, that praise, you know, it wasn't real. It wasn't true. I'm not actually that. Okay, so it can really just backfire. So let's talk about praising for effort. And there's 5 sort of qualifiers that I want to give you about praise that is going to work in order to nurture a growth mindset and also to help your children cooperate, which is the golden thing, right? We want our kids in groups to cooperate. And later on in the series, we're going to talk about how to reinforce the group. We also, you know, we want all kids to be able to cooperate, and we know they can. So let's talk about the 5 qualifiers of praise. So effective praise is frequent. Now, when I say frequent, this is research-based. It is 100 times a day. That is the level at which it starts to make a difference. So if you're home with your kids all day, if you're with kids for a whole day, that's 100 times a day, which is like about 10 times an hour. If your kid that goes to school, or if you have a kid who, you know, is with another adult for some of the day, then say you're with that kid for like 20, you know, 4 or 5 hours, right? That's like 20 to 25 times an hour. Of course, if you're with kids for like a couple of hours, you don't have to get up to 100 in those couple of hours, but more is better in this case, okay? So lots of praise, and when we get to specificity, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about how to get up to that number, because sometimes it can feel like, what am I supposed to praise for 100 times? And what I want to say is, I want you to praise anything you want to see more of, even fragments of behavior that are the, you know, working towards the right thing. Okay, so we want it to be very frequent. We want it to be very specific. So when I say specific, I mean no good job and no good girl, good boy. What I want you to do instead is really label the thing that they're doing that is right. So, I see you walking over to put those books away. Okay, so maybe the child hasn't put the books away yet, but they're walking over to do it. And you can see how when you move into this mode that's like more sportscastery, where you sort of are labeling and saying what they're doing well, it becomes easier to get up to 100. Okay, so I see you working really hard on that problem. You've been so focused with that animal for the last little while. Gosh, I noticed you're doing a lot of research about farm animals. What'd you learn? Right? So then that one kind of crosses the boundary of praise and presence, right? It's like, I noticed you've been doing this thing. What'd you learn? I'm here to listen. Okay? So frequent, specific. I want it to be in close proximity. So I usually say within hugging distance and arm's distance. And what you're doing when you get close to a kid and praise them is you are making yourself the most salient thing in their environment. Okay, so you're making sure that they get it, they understand what you're saying, they make sense of it, they process it. It also increases the chance that they're gonna hear you, and you know, we don't want our praise to fall on deaf ears. So get in there close. I want you to seal it with touch. So it's really gonna depend who the child is that you're working with, what the touch looks like. Different kids like different kinds of touch. For some kids, touch might be a high five. For some kids, it might just be like a quick pat on the shoulder. For some kids, it might be a little hand squeeze. Whatever it is that the child likes, I want you to really seal it. A note about that is that when you are giving child touch, whether it's a high five is a good one for a lot of kids who are engaged in activities, or a shoulder pat. When you're doing that, it's important that the touch is small enough that it doesn't interrupt the activity, okay? We don't want it to interrupt the activity. Okay, so we've got frequent, we've got specific, we've got sealed with touch. I want you to be really, really effusive and authentic. Okay, so some children will respond to your praise in ways like you give a lot of praise and then kind of shrink back. And that child might need more softly effusive praise, so just a little bit quieter. So play with it with the different kids that you work with, and you'll notice that some kids like big praise, and some kids like you can even whisper. Some kids like small. Yeah, I see you doing it. You got it. And sometimes it might not even be words. It could just be with your eyes or just a nod, like, I see you, I'm here with you. And then the fifth component, or before we say the fifth component, I also want to say about authenticity. It is really critical to be authentic. And sometimes people will say, well, I tried praise and it didn't work. And oftentimes it's because you haven't been authentic. And I know that's hard to sort of take, and sometimes it can feel kind of strange or weird right at the beginning when you're just starting to play with this. So give yourself some grace and then get really authentic. Try to speak from a heart place. And when you're doing it, when you're praising, praise things that the kids that you're working with are working on. Don't praise things that they already know how to do. I mean, if I look at you as an adult and I say, wow, you put your shirt on, you're going to be like, yes, I put my shirt on every day. So that's what we want to sort of avoid. I want you to instead focus on what they're working on. Wow, I see you hanging your jacket up. That's awesome. For other kids, it might be more subdued. Hey, yeah, thanks for coming to our group on time, right? So adjust your praise to the age and the profile of the child. And then the fifth component is that it must be timely. So again, this is based on the research. Timely means within 2 seconds. So that's pretty fast. So you can't kind of like be across the room or like doing something else, right? You have to already be present and be naming the things as they occur. So I encourage you for that reason to try this method where you kind of give yourself a boundaried amount of time to practice giving praise. Because you have to practice. We don't do this oftentimes in our lives, and so it's a new way of speaking. So give yourself the chance to practice. And what I want to say is that oftentimes I'll tell people to do what I call the special 5. So the special 5 is a boundaried amount of time during which you're gonna let go of all other priorities in order to focus exclusively on your child or on the group of kids that you're working with, right? And you're going to praise them for anything that they do that is right. And even if it's a fragment of a behavior, sometimes I say praise the shards. When people say this group of kids is having such a tricky time, there's nothing going well. Okay, praise the shards. Find something. There is something working. Find it and praise it. And get really present. Now, I often put a timer on the special 5, and that helps, I think, as much for the grown-up. The grown-up needs to know sometimes that this is boundaried. I'm doing this only for 5 minutes, and then I can move on to the next list of things I've got to do. And it also helps for the kids to learn to sort of measure time and like, this is how much time I have with this grown up. And maybe it's like, I'm going to work with you for 5 minutes and then you're going to work on this project by yourself and I'm going to work with the next kid, right? So in both of those scenarios, the child is learning to measure time. They're getting your presence. They're also practicing independence, working on their executive functioning, all kinds of good, great stuff happening for development, both during the special 5 and after the special 5 when they're maybe more on their own. So that is praise and presence for you. I really encourage you to think about praising the kids that you are with as much as possible. Make sure to make it frequent, specific, sealed with touch, timely, and most importantly, effusive and authentic. Attune with the kids, give them the kind of praise that they need for their particular profile, and don't be afraid to praise a group of kids as a group, right? Especially for those of you who are working with groups, praise the whole group. I hope that you are well. I look forward to our next time together, helping you to build calm and cooperative families, communities, and groups is my mission. I look forward to talking to you soon.